So I did stop, I did save it, came back to record and realized that my microphone was messed up. So for about 20 minutes I recorded and then I stopped to save it again and realized, oh, it wasn't. So what I've done here is I'm just speeding it up a little bit so that instead of 20 minutes of me trying to make my way through it, I can just speed it up to about 10 minutes and discuss what I did. So what I did was made a copy of my mountain by duplicating the layer and then going to Control T and flipping it vertically and then doing it there. Now what I'm doing here is taking the blend tool and softening everything on this layer vertically so that everything starts softening vertically, and then I switch over to the oil brush set to number 4 so that it starts streaking it on this. So I kind of softened it a little bit and then I went back and streaked it a lot with it. So that gives that really nice reflective feel. So you've got a lot of the colors, but they're all kind of, vertical up and the up and down is what makes this cell as a reflection. Okay. So that's what I'm doing right here, is just really kind of blending it in to everything around it in vertical strokes so that we've got that nice vertical. And then once I've got that, I'm going to take the brush and kind of soften some of this upper area up here, knowing that I'm going to really kind of delete some of that and move it around. But then I want to just kind of play around with some of the colors some more. So that's what I did there, is I just deleted that. Then I went back and softened it because it left a harsh under paint over, how the paint builds on layers. You could see where I cut it. So I just went back and softened it out. And then continuing to take the blending tool and soften some of those back, so I didn't want as many paint strokes in it, so that it would just kind of gave it that more reflective look. And that's what you can see right here, is that it really does that. So after that, I realized that I had that pretty much how I wanted it, and knew that I needed to start trying to work on some of the other areas to kind of pull some of those together. And what I did here was I selected this darker color. As you can see, made it a little bit more green because I wanted to try and start bringing in some of the stuff that's around it, start, kind of pulling it together. So I'm going with kind of the filbert brush, changing the size down, going to different greens, and really just kind of taking and tapping it in and smearing it around so that it's a highlight, but it's not a real bright highlight, because remember, all of this is still in cast shadow. So I wanted to kind of blend in, but start giving some definition to the land, some interest, I guess you could say. So there's not just a blob of green. And then just start laying that around. So that's what I'm doing here, is taking that and just laying in some kind of the lay of the land, if you will, kind of feel to it. And the main thing with this is, as you're doing this, you don't want this to be too bright. You don't want it to be too dark, but you don't want it to be too bright. And you want it to be just enough contrast and just enough softness that it gives you that feel of the other color peeking through. And that could be a dip in the hill. It could be kind of the light fading off, that kind of stuff. So that's really one of the key things with it, is keep doing it loose so that you can keep that feel of everything. Now, one of the other things I always recommend doing is kind of moving around on the painting, grabbing colors from different areas, using them in the other areas. So like this color was some of the other green that I had in the background. So I'm using that to bring in here to, again, start defining some of the lay of the land and giving some interest, some, mossy areas, some grassy areas. It doesn't really matter because this is still shadowed, so you're not going to have a lot of detail. Detail here would not only bring it closer in the feel of it, but it can also just make it feel wrong to your eyes because your eyes are expecting it to be darker and not see as much. Okay. It's just one of those perception things. It's kind of hard to overly explain, but just remember, if something's in shadow and something's further back like this is, less detail. Okay. But adding in blobs of color and shape here, it lets your mind, or not so much yours, but the viewer's mind, fill in what they want to see. They might look at this and be like, oh, I see some, mossy areas. Oh, I see some swampy areas. Oh, I see some grass. That's fine. That's part of art. It's letting them kind of get that feel for what they see so they can find something different. and be able to have that freedom to do so. Now what I'm doing here is I'm kind of breaking up that shoreline a little bit with, again, vertical strokes, because I want this to kind of blend into some of the reflection. So I'm taking some of that same paint and just using the number 4 setting, blending it down, okay, keeping some of those vertical strokes. And again, this just kind of gives some interest. It gives some breakup of the lines. It gives something to go behind reflections and go behind highlights here in a little bit. And it gives me an area where I can start laying in shorelines and so forth. Now, until this point, we've primarily been using just freehand brushing with the oil brush and so forth. We are going to dive into some stencil use here in a little bit. And you can see right here what I'm doing is I'm bringing in some of that blue reflective color from the shadow of the mountain there, because I want to have some of that in there. I think it adds a little bit more interest. I took that out earlier. I kind of changed my mind. That's one of the great things about it. You can look at it and go, I'm going to add a little bit of this. I'm going to add a little bit of that. I'm going to take a little bit of that away. And start really, playing around with it. Like those reflections there. I decided I didn't like them. Was going to add some little islands of grass. And I was like, nah, I don't like it. Again, wanted to break up some of this green and give that kind of a hill kind of feel to it so that it could slope down and push that darker color back a little bit to make it feel farther off in the distance. And then add a little bit to it to do the same thing with the stuff behind it, and then just kind of blend them all together and soften them. Now this is where I'm going to switch over to stencils. You don't have to use stencils. I'd use them because it saves me time. I can sit here and paint all these. I painted all these stencils. But I don't want to, because A, it would make the video much longer. B, I'm kind of lazy. I just want to be able to paint and paint faster. So I use my stencils to go ahead and do this part. And also, if you're somebody who's really nervous about drawing something, use the stencils. You can set them so that you can contort them, twist them, turn them, resize them, and then, just paint and add stuff to it. It gives you a lot of freedom, basically. These are over on Gumroad. They're really, I made them originally for Art Rage, but the stencils work just fine in Rebelle, since Rebelle now has stencils. So as you can see here, I'm just kind of looking in there and freehanding real quick the reflections, which is just kind of getting the rough shape of them. I don't need to do them, but I can definitely use the stencil to flip it over and get it in there. So either way, this just, again, makes it easier to lay in the rough shape of it. And then from there, use the brush on 4 setting to streak it, just like we did before. Okay, and that starts giving us some believable trees and everything else. And then you can even streak the grass up into the tree, like I just did there, and it starts giving you the indication of some grasses and stuff. And this is a little bush brush that stencil that I made. And what I wanted to do here was add some colors, because we've got a lot of greens, we've got a lot of oranges and that kind of stuff. So I wanted to throw a little bit of purple into it just to add some interest. And so that's what I'm doing here, is just adding in that purple here. So almost to the end of this part where I went and saved it and then jumped back to the regular recording, which worked just fine. But I wanted to come in here and just do this quick recording so that of voiceover, so it wouldn't just be silence, and explain why it was silence. Anyway, if any of this part of it you have a question about, just leave a comment below. I know it's kind of fast, but hopefully you got everything out of it that you need. So I'll let this kind of finish out, and then we'll jump into the next part, which will just seamlessly continue on with this. So we've got some really good looking beginning of grasses here and some different shapes and that kind of stuff, which has given us some really nice looking textures. I want to play around with this just a little bit more and get that, kind of played in there. And I also want to start adding in some foreground stuff here. So I'm actually going to go ahead and select some of this color here. And make sure I'm on the correct layer. Yep. Okay. Actually, I think for this one I may even just go ahead and do a new layer. And I want to me go with this rough dry. Let's see how that looks if we kind of tap that in. Okay. It's got a decent amount of texture to it, which is not bad at all. So I want to throw some more grasses and stuff in here and bushes. So I'm just going to kind of go along and tap in a little bit of this here and there. Like so. Now I want to come up here and we're going to go a little bit more green and a little bit higher up for that green saturation. And we'll say OK. Alright. And I'm going to bring this down in size and just kind of play in some of this green here and just kind of smudge it around a little bit. Because again, we're just trying to build up more of an underpainting. Not necessarily covering up all this, but just trying to lay in. And you can even go with, you know, like for example, if you wanted to go with some of the rake and just kind of get a little bit of that texture in there, here and there. It's a little too uniform for grass completely, but it is a good start to kind of keep laying in these different things. Now I just switched to the fan brush, and that's the main thing that I would suggest while you're doing this is play around with some of these brushes. You'll find ones that you like, and for example, I really like these knife brushes. To me, these are just kind of some interesting shapes and the way they just kind of smush it around and the different textures. And can you tell that I stopped working on this one and did another painting that was larger DPI? Alright. I'm going to switch over to the 3 here so I can kind of get a little bit of smearing with a lighter touch. Like so, because I really want to kind of blend some of this together. I'm actually going to go ahead and sample this other color, darker color again, because I want to kind of bring that up and through here to break up some of this green. Like so. Okay. Something like that. I'm going to jump back down to this layer here because I just saw this. Apparently I had an errant brush stroke here. So let me just fix that. Like so. There we go. Zoom back out. And again, this is very much the impressionistic look, you know, as far as it goes for trying to get that feel of it. And if you want to, again, if you want to kind of get it tighter and more precise, photorealistic, not a hard thing to do, it just takes more time. And the main, you know, it's really the same techniques and stuff, but the main thing I want to do here is just kind of show you how to play around and get the foundation for what you need by just using some of the core brushes and just laying in color. What I'm doing here is just kind of stroking in some different leaves and that kind of stuff just to add texture. And I'm going to switch over to a different knife. Okay, and let's switch to a little bit of this other green and kind of pull some of these around a little bit here and there. just a couple of things, and I can switch to the pencil and bring that down in size and get some nice wispy kind of colors. And again, switch to maybe the darker color, pull a few of those. So it's just kind of giving that feeling, and going back and forth on these colors is what gives this that feeling of layers of grass. Okay, and do a few going, more straight, like so. And now I'm going to go to this color, which is our lighter green. I'm going to go a little bit lighter and just kind of throw in a few of those here and there. I just want this to be kind of messy grass that's not really, I don't want it to look like a well-kept lawn. I just want it to kind of look like a bunch of different things going on here. And we're going to throw some different colors in here as well, but I wanted to have that here. Okay. So, let's see how that looks. Yeah, I think that'll work. Now, one thing else I want to do is I want to get more of a defined shoreline over here and maybe play around with some of these grasses a little more. I do have a grass stencil right here. And this one, actually I need to change it so I don't have the light ratio locked. You can really kind of use here and there to add some texture. Do be careful with it. This one is a little repetitive, as you can see, but it works really well if you're trying to just throw in some quick background texture. And you don't want too much texture here because this is kind of back a little bit. So we're going to bring that down even further, like so. And I think, well, I maybe can stay with the pencil for this. Let's see. Kind of depends. And just kind of move it around like so. And by using the stencil, I've got grass that's all going to be kind of a similar size. Oops. Kind of stuff, but then I can come back and just throw in some scratchy stuff. Backspace to get rid of that. Alright, so like I was saying about the shoreline, I want to put a little bit more defined. So let's go to this dark greenish color. We're going to come over more to the blue side, bluish purple, and down a little bit, and tell it okay. I want my shoreline to be in here. And because this is kind of a sunrise, sunset, golden hour kind of thing, I want to draw in kind of a darker shoreline, like so. But notice how I'm not drawing it necessarily completely one line, like I'm not going like that, Instead, I'm kind of just lightly going across it so that it kind of picks up. I'm going to bring that size down since I'm further back. I just want to kind of give a little scritch in here and there to define where that's at. Okay. Now that I've got that there, and that gives me a really good kind of separation, now what I want to do is bring in some highlights through here. Okay, and I'm going to do that on a separate layer. And I'm going to come back up, go to my water, and I have a, where is it? Oh, looked right past it. Ripples stencil. Again, turning off the lock size. Gonna go stretch this out just a bit and kind of put here. I'm gonna go with the spray can, grab some of this lighter blue, and I'm gonna go even a little bit lighter, which I have that over here. I mean, that's kind of this one. And I just want to lay in and move this around. Like so. And bring this down in size. Like so. And that's going to give me that really kind of a nice ripply effect. Now then, so now what I can do is I can come up here to the freehand. I can go back to where my land masses are, using that black line as kind of my reference point. And delete it. And then look for any others. And delete it. Control D. Just use the arrow keys to bump that over a little bit. There we go. So, and we can come back and play around with that some more. But you can see how that's giving it a real... these are a little bit bigger, that's a little smaller, it's kind of getting closer together, and so it looks like it's kind of fading back into there with some lighter color. So I think it's kind of a cool way to do it. And then we've got our grass in front of it up here, so this grass is in front of it, which helps push it back further. Okay. So now what I want to do is, these are kind of the stars of the show here, so I want to play with this a little bit. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to make another layer, and you can use stencils, but let me show you. I've got stencils for this, but let me kind of show you with some of the knife tools and stuff that you can do. Drag this over here a little bit. I'm going to do Control, click on that layer so that I have those mountains. Okay. I can't do a protect transparency because I don't have anything here yet, but by doing Control, click, I've essentially made a mask that's just this is selected. Okay, and then I'm back up here on this layer, and I'm going to select the Alt button and click on here, which is really this one right here. I'm going to come in here, I'm going to go over, actually I'm going to come straight down. So I'm just making it a little bit lighter and basically staying right where we were with the color part. Okay. And now I know I want to have the rocks kind of all, the highlights kind of go the same direction a little bit. So I'm going to Let's go with knife texture. And this one is rather soft, but I can just touch and barely pull it across. And I'm going to get that same like I would if I had a palette knife. Okay, and I'm just going to lightly, I'm leaving it on 3 because 3 kind of fades out a little more easily. Okay. And so I can start to lay in where some of these go, change the size of it ever so slightly, change the pressure of it, and I can start laying in some different highlights, like maybe where snow's catching, you know, like maybe it's really cold up there or something like that, and we're just kind of getting that feeling of stuff coming across. And I want to leave spaces, and I'm just looking for like these, any of these highlights that, you know, kind of from earlier. Any I like, I can just apply a little bit more pressure, make a little bit more solid feel. I'm gonna add a little less for some, a little bit more here and there. And I can just start kind of laying these across where I want them to be. Okay. So again, you can just switch back and forth between these different textures and then just kind of play it around across it, adding pressure, taking away pressure. And by doing it here on this layer, that means I can come back and erase any of this. Like if there's something that gets really too solid and I want to kind of lighten it up or you know, take it back off, I can do so. Okay. But this is really just a matter of kind of playing around on it here and there to get kind of the feel of what you like, and moving around on there. Okay. Like so. Maybe this is a little bit lighter, but yet a little bit showing. Because if you put a little bit more up here, it's going to make that shadow seem a little bit darker, even though you didn't do anything. You just have the light next to it. Okay. I think I'm going to add a couple of big swatches, like maybe just something kind of like that. There we go. Because again, if I don't like it, I can get rid of it, but I want to add some more solid kind of spots. And I can lightly scrub over it, push it back, tap it, like so. Okay, hit my dot, my period. That'll bring it back. Now then, if I want to, all I got to do here is I can come back up to erase. I could even go to the spatter erase, bring that down, and just kind of lightly go across some of it to break it up a little bit. And again, this is kind of what you like, you know. If you want to leave a little more solid areas, you can. If you want to come back in and really kind of carve out some areas, you can. Alright, and then you can even press in and really kind of soften it down by blending some of that in and letting it just kind of fade off into the different areas. Okay. So as you can see, you can really keep playing around with that. Now let me show you the stencil that I have, and the reason I use my stencil, because like I said, stencils are great for saving time. Oops, I'm at the wrong one, sorry. So I have this one right here, specifically designed to paint these kind of highlights. I'm going to go a little bit lighter because I want a little bit more of a snow kind of cap on this upper part. And I'm going to bring that down a little bit in size. And I'm going to turn. Nice thing about these stencils, you can stretch them, turn them, and twist them, and get 1,000 different looks with just a little bit of effort. Okay. But you can see, I'll move this in just a second so you actually can see, but you'll be able to see how this quickly and easily starts throwing in these highlights to give you a much more broken palette knife kind of a view. So that way, if you want to get more of a nice look to it, you can. Just again, pay attention to your angles and what you have going on. And sometimes with this, maybe a little less is more. Like so. Save this real quick. I want this to be a little bit more vertical. Like so. Okay. Control D. And let's move this. Oops. Let's move this over here and take a look at some of this. So I'm kind of liking that, but I think I would like to do something a little bit different. So I'm going to select all of these, and I'm going to come over here. Just a bit more of a peachy color. And add some of that in. Here and there. So that way we've got a little bit more of that color. So let me get rid of that. Yeah, and I kind of like that. That blends it into the other one. So I think that's a good place to look. So I'm going to save this real quick.